I'm going to go ahead and get started. So thank you guys all for joining. We have an extra special guest with us today. We have Carol Meyers, who's truly a legend in the B2B marketing field. Carol is the former CMO of Rapid7, where she helped lead the team to over 10x revenue growth across 8 years, completed a successful IPO, not once, but 4 times. She was also CMO of LogMeIn, Unica. She currently is a board director at numerous companies, a partner at Glasswing Ventures, and has really just seen the evolution of marketing over a multi-decade career. Excited to hear all of her wisdom and also hear how she's thinking about the future of the space now, having touched a lot of companies. And I know you have a lot of really interesting thoughts on the future of AI when it comes to marketing. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm going to let you introduce me everywhere I go from now on.
No, you can just record me and you can play that clip.
It sounds much better than it really is. So thank you. That's great.
That's part of marketing, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, I wanted to start off. So you at Rapid7, you went from 30 million, which obviously at that point, there's some semblance of product market fit, but to over 330 million, which is a feat. Most companies never get to see that. What were some of the biggest lessons learned of going through that level of scale in terms of what worked and what didn't? I'd actually love to hear both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. You don't always think about it going in. You just do. You're in the middle of it and you're doing. I think for us, a couple of things that were really important that worked well is that to help generate that growth, we expanded into other areas we were in cybersecurity, into other areas of cybersecurity. And that gave us a lot of different growth levers, depending on where cybersecurity teams were spending their money. And that was really effective. And we did a number of acquisitions along the way, which also help you grow a little faster, even though most of the ones we did were very small. They were sort of more tech. And we rightfully said, give us the good tech, we'll put it through our sales and marketing channel. And that worked really well for us. What didn't work? I mean, there's so many little things that didn't work. And sometimes those worked at one point and then another. So for example, I was talking about all these different products we were bringing to market. And initially, we said, great, we have a sales and marketing engine, let's just put them through. But what we realized over time was it was too many products for one sales team to sell. And we needed to separate the sales team into product families. Not always ideal, because now a single customer wants to buy multiple products, probably talking to several salespeople. But it turned out to be much better because it was much more manageable for the sales team to really learn and understand the product, and I align my marketing by product as well, so that that's sort of a single go-to-market motion for each of the products. So just kind of put it all through one big channel. Didn't work so well. Separating them out worked pretty well. And over time, we were able to bring it back together at later stages.
That makes a lot of sense. People always talk about product selling versus solution selling, and obviously the goal of products and families is you want to do the solution sale, but in practice, probably not as easy as that looks. So just saying, great, we have more, let's add them together and go sell the package.
Right. Yeah, you kind of teach people to sell that solution and then bring in the other specialists to help you complete it if you get somebody interested in the whole thing. But often they needed to do one thing, and the fact that you had the full solution is a great benefit. They may not be ready for it right now, but it's a really great benefit that they teach you for it.
Were there any non-traditional channels that you guys leveraged that were pretty successful when it came to marketing or sales?
One for us was that we had a open source product, a product called Metasploit, and it's another product that was acquired by the company, and it had been open source when we acquired it. And we did, like most open source companies, build a for pay UI on top of it. But that was a really great vehicle for us because it was a product that was loved and used by many in the cybersecurity community. So doing around that just helped us increase our brand awareness and recognition, and helped us introduce cybersecurity people to other products. that were, ones we sold that were open source. So that was kind of a unique thing for us. Maybe the other one was we did vulnerability management. And I always talk to companies about thinking about, well, what data do you have? So we had data on the vulnerabilities. And so we made a database on our website, even though there are some that are open, of all the vulnerabilities, talking about what they were, why they matter, and also giving some information about what you could do to protect yourself from it or to mitigate problems with it. And that was a huge attractor of SEO for us, and helped us get in front of a lot more people. So I'm always asking companies, let's tell us what data is useful to people, because that can be a great way to increase your brand recognition and awareness.
And one thing you kind of touched on with both of those examples that I think oftentimes goes underappreciated is both of those were focused on education. It was not trying to sell your product or sell your solution. It was really about understanding who's your customer, what are their pain points, and let's meet them there. And eventually it'll play itself out.
Yes. Yeah, we were really big believers in that. We made it as easy as possible. If you already knew you wanted our solution, or at least wanted to consider it, to help get you, right into that process. But we felt there was a really big obligation to just be a contributor to the knowledge base and to the success of our audience, cybersecurity people, regardless of whether they bought our products or not. We wanted to be part of helping them succeed.
Any tactics or advice you give to people who are selling to a more technical audience or engineering focused audience or things like that? I know you mentioned the open source product. That's a trickier thing than selling to a non-technical audience.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So for a technical audience or for a non-technical audience? Non-technical?
For technical. What are your tips and tricks there? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, I think being less afraid to be clear about what your products do and how they're different. A lot of times people want to hold that close because they feel like they're going to be tipping off their competitors if they put too much information out there. But technical people want to self-serve. They want to learn about your product. They want to figure out if it's the right one for them. And so I think the more information you put out and make accessible to them, the better. They want to understand your pricing. They want to understand, what makes your product different. How does it really work? You make some bold claim, prove it to me, and I think making it as much as you can. Not everybody can be a product-led growth company because your product may be too complicated, but give them as much opportunity as you can to actually see and engage with your product in some way, because I think technical people really appreciate that. They don't like to feel like they're being sold to. They like to sell themselves.
I completely agree. And I guess, do you feel that the goal of marketing or the KPIs you measure shift in that scenario?
Oh, it's a good question. I think ultimately marketing has to be responsible for revenue. So they don't really shift per se, but there are other metrics you should be looking at, right? Because if you're doing that well, it should lead to you engaging with more of the right people, for your solution, the people who it's going to be a great fit for, and you're really going to be able to help them. So I think ultimately it still comes down to marketing, contributing to revenue and being a driver of revenue. But you're going to have other metrics along the way that are going to tell you if the information you're putting out there is helpful. Like, are people reading it? Are you getting referrals? Are people coming back and checking to see what's new from you? If you have something that they can subscribe to, are they subscribing? Are they following you on LinkedIn and X and other places where you're putting content out? Because that tells you, hey, my content is doing the thing I wanted should do. And if I'm doing that well, ultimately it's going to turn into revenue. But I don't think you ever get away from revenue. It's number one.
I like that you said that too, because I think that's one of the things that I've seen align marketing and sales teams. How else have you at all your different roles really come in and tried to align the marketing and sales teams together?
I think it starts with everybody being on the same page about what the company's strategy is. And at the simplest level, it's, who do we best serve? How are we helping them? And how are we thinking about reaching out to them, and what's going to be our sales model? Once you have really broad agreement on that, then together, sales and marketing need to make that happen. Marketing needs to be focused on attracting right customers, giving right messaging, helping sure sales has the right tools. I think that's really important, that marketing be talking a lot about what's working, what's not, what they want to experiment with, what they want to change, what they want to try, and that there are shared metrics. I think it's incredibly important for marketing team members to recognize about getting messages or waypoints along the way, but everybody needs to be thinking what I'm doing in marketing is ultimately going to help us connect the right customers with our products and make them happy. And if that's not what we're doing, then we can generate all MQL like they're kind of worthless. So I think it's important for sales to know the marketing cares about that revenue, that we don't say, oh, we handed that stuff off to you. I can't help it. I think that leads to a lot of discord and anger for sure.
The reality is SQL are subjective versus deals not subjective, very objective. I mean, I'm
yes.
sure you've dealt numerous times in your career with the whole fight between sales being like, those MQLs are crap, and then marketing being like, what do you mean? They're great, blah blah blah. That's no way to align a team.
Exactly, and in fact, that's even that, just getting a line around what are these. You're going to make stages because it just helps you measure things, but being in agreement about what those are. All the time about it well. I always say, by the way, it's not like it's a known thing. You can go to Webster's dictionary and everybody finds MQL the same way. So don't necessarily think about that. I think when you get opportunities a little closer, and most teams have some similar things around what they consider an opportunity. So about what everything means and what everybody's role is. I think that really helps.
One of my favorite kind of personal live stories around this is I was I was a mechanical engineer, did not think I was going to go into marketing at all, and was very junior out of college, joined an early stage startup, and I ended up kind of leading a lot of go-to-market functions, including the SDR team, and I learned a really quick lesson of where you place incentives will drive 100% of behavior. And somebody once told me, and I mean, no offense to sales people buy this, I actually think it's a great thing, but that sales is coin operated. And we had set certain essentially benchmarks around what an SQL was for them to get compensated. And it was so amazing how you move the puck, behavior totally shifts. And so we had to keep recalibrating, figure out what are we actually trying to get them to accomplish, and where we could be there. And it was just so fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I know you say sales are collaborative, but essentially they're achievement oriented, and things are, the way your achievement is by revenue, right? Because if you then have achieved, it's recovery. But you have to be careful about what you pay marketing based on MQLs. I'm not a fan of that at all. I don't think that's a good idea. It doesn't necessarily incentivize the right behavior in people. And I feel as well, I did a conversation with a lab saying they had loopholes, let's just say. And you're like, okay, did not expect that behavior. Lesson learned about what to pay people for and not pay people for.
The good news is you'll find those very, very quickly because they will get exploited. So,
yes, they will. Someone will figure it out.
do you have any, I guess both on the revenue, like CMO or CMO side, do you have any kind of non-functional approaches to the role or the function?
I wish I had something amazing to say. I think maybe the non-functional part for me is I don't even think of myself as a marketer. Someone asked me about that recently, and I said I don't really think of myself as a marketer. I think of myself as a business leader, and I just happen to have spent the last 20 years applying that business leadership in the realm of marketing. But prior to that, I did sales, and like you, I didn't start in either of those things. I started in finance, of all things. I was an auditor. I always thought about business first, so maybe I'm a business first marketer as opposed to a market first marketer. So I'm not like, oh my gosh, we have to spend much more on the brand unless I'm really thinking that is what's going to drive my business. So I'm always thinking about what are we trying to achieve as a company? What's the role of marketing in doing that? Versus thinking about marketing first is the best way I can put it.
And it's clear too, just even now you're talking about this, you're very data-driven. And one thing I've noticed is actually over time, marketing as a function has gotten significantly more data-driven. It's kind of aligned with the increasing budget because they are really driving revenue creation and retention and all the things that you want them to do. Having seen this evolution, I guess, what have been your biggest things you've seen as the marketing function has shifted to be more data-driven?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think that it means that marketing can be a lot more accountable than it used to be. And I think accountability is positive anyway. I think a really part of that is when you're accountable, they have more authority and responsibility. So I think that's been a really good impact. And I think it can help you feel closer to the customer because you're getting, sometimes you didn't get the feedback on things, right? But now we can measure response to things we're saying, we get a lot more feedback and we can adjust it. That's a fabulous change in marketing.
That kind of leads me to my next question around, technology. So technology on hand in hand with that. I think marketing is both one of the best adopters and best offenders when it comes to adopting a bazillion tools. As you've watched the evolution of marketing, I guess how do you view the tech stack as an enabler, as a co-pilot, as a propeller? Like, where do you think that's actually helped? Where is it hurt? What do you think of the future for the marketing tech stack?
I'm very hopeful, and I think that there's been a big improvement in how people who are in the operational roles that support the martech stack are perceived. And in some companies, we've sort of rolled the sales and marketing operations together into a RevOps, so that we get a really great look at what's that tech stack and so we don't have marketing and sales buying two different things that ultimately do the same thing. And I think that's been really important. I always viewed my marketing operations team as not just the team to the reporting or running an analysis when I need it. You know, my um, my vision for that I always shared with them is you are about making marketing work better. So go find those new technologies. Go find those things that we should be doing and adapting and changing in how we work, so we can just get more and more effective at what we're doing. And I've been really a huge proponent of marketing technology. I think the challenge has been sometimes you get a complicated stack and not everything works together. And then you have trouble measuring things that you put this in place to help you be more efficient and
I personally Google does really well. And I can make the complexity really the remodeling. We're starting to see partially the people that can feel meaningful to me. Also, what I do is consult about very even kind of very equal to certain women.
Yeah, I know it's really interesting. User cooking. We certainly talk for time our same guess we think to answering to solve because my version of data much email about these so actually kind of right and so they making things do great with others listeners I'm at your screen I'll repeat you're getting a lot of saying other things big where I'm out of checking out and telling you anyway from me and to build
so second what are you
now I got that assuming I basically that's having a person feel linked and how they need to something that's more reactive tracking is easier and there's a creativity of AI should do or designing a posters and he had ideas so he had his creative ideas and then he used AI to really bring them to life in even more creative ways, right? So together it could augment, but I think there's a certain amount of creativity that AI is not quite ready for, but it may get there.
I think we've been saying the same thing is 3 things that the humans we believe will still do is the creative, the strategic, and the relationships. On the relationship side, though, to your point there, I find that good salespeople are fantastic at building those one-to-one human relationships, really deeply empathizing with the customers, understanding their needs. Where I find that tends to not be the case is more on the SDR side, where they're kind of more just volume game, more of a machine. Oftentimes they miss the messaging or like don't understand the customer. I've heard takes on all sides of this argument. Does the SDR function go away? What do you think?
I think it probably will. I do, because as someone who used to lead a team of SDRs or BDRs, whatever you want to call the function, and just fabulous people that we hired, it's just an incredibly hard thing to just come in straight out of school, learn a new technology, and be able to have a meaningful conversation with people. And the way we run things, at least in tech, is just when they start to get to that point, we make them into an AE anyway.
Exactly.
So I think there's a lot of that process that can probably be automated more. And people aren't at their desks anymore; they're not answering their phone anymore anyway. So I do think we're going to see that function shrink a lot. Does it ever go away? I think it could, but I might be wrong about that. But I definitely think it's going to start shrinking dramatically.
That's the area I'm watching most closely. I'm curious to see how that plays out. I think it's going to start playing out quickly. So one to watch.
Yeah, I'm a big tech. Like, I'm always very I'm on the optimism side of tech and all the great things it's going to do. I'm usually it's usually a little slower than I'm expecting. Just
that
as a
is usually the case. Although I will say that is normally the case. This new AI wave, I think, has every piece of it is going faster than we've ever seen happen before. It's definitely, something feels different. We'll see how that actually plays out.
I do agree with that. I think when I hear people say, well, it's not perfect, I'm like, no, it's not perfect, but it's awfully good, and it just keeps getting better. So
on the analytics side, people for a decade have been really trying to just use intent data or provide new data sources, new analytics to really help you do all the things you mentioned, of identify the right accounts to go after, the ones at risk, all that. When you, over the course of your career, I guess, how would you ingest that data and what would you do with it? Did you find that a lot of it just went unused? Was it manual? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, so interesting. We were very early adopters of lead scoring, and I don't mean the kind that most people were doing in Marketo, where they said, like, oh, if a person asks for a demo, give them 5 points. I'm talking like machine learning driven lead scoring that it was so interesting. It didn't even take into account exactly what people did on our website or how they engaged with us. It was much more about who is it, what company are with, what do we know about them, and it was pretty good. Now, did we use it well? No, but it was really good in the sense that up to about 80%, the score where they were like, hey, this is the 80, this is in the 80th percentile. You could see the clear improvement in conversion all the way through to someone becoming a customer. It got a little wonky somewhere in that 85 to 90%. It would dip down a little bit. So there was something in it here that wasn't good. But we could have done much more with that. We could have used that to prioritize who BDRs did engage with, or pass that information along to the AEs. But there was always a lot of doubt in its effectiveness, and therefore we didn't use it as much as we should. However, I relied on it in a lot of ways for predicting whether or not we were going to be building enough pipeline.
Interesting. That also gets kind of back to your earlier point around technology as a co-pilot. This feels to me like one of the lowest hanging fruit opportunities, where technology is actually the one that does something with that data. And to your point, again, lets the humans focus on the human things, but really goes and acts as that co-pilot for the marketing and sales team.
Yes. Yeah. And this is where, for BDRs and AEs, and I'm seeing some new technology emerge here as well in terms of doing those scoring, but not just at that lead stage, which is where I think a lot of this started, but really also digging into the salesperson's pipeline and surfacing up a to-do list for the day. Like, you really need to re-engage with this particular opportunity. It's a hot opportunity, and and here's 5 actions we think you could take, that type of thing. I think we're going to see some very interesting technology there.
That's such a good point, because historically people sit down, open up Salesforce, and it's just whatever they had queued up. It has nothing to do with any actual data. So that's a really good point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where you get a lot of variability, right? You have reps who are so good at that. The reps who are top performers, I have always found is it's a fascinating and amazing to sit down and talk with them about their own process, who they decide to prioritize, how they go about doing that. They get to know the product really well, right? They do all these things and they're just so great. And you just think, well, if we could just code that, maybe we could help everyone else get to that level.
That's kind of like the point of gongs and choruses of the world too, right? Can we clone our best reps across the org?
It's not easy. They have a secret sauce. You kind of have to pull it out of them.
When you talk to those best performing reps, do you find a lot of what they do, especially when it comes to prioritization or figuring out who to spend the most time with, is that gut driven or data driven or a combination?
You know, it usually feels gut driven when you talk to someone. And I think it's partly because a lot of us can't articulate what we're doing with the data because it's coming in from, they're probably using even um, not necessarily data that they're pulling out of a CRM, but um, sense, a sense they got from the last call they had with the customer. You know, um, there's things that they keep track of. I think around how articulate how articulate a customer was about the problem they're trying to solve. I think there's a lot that goes into it. It's just a lot of experience that some of these really great salespeople have, and probably more of an ability to emphasize, empathize than I think most of us think about with salespeople, right? Because they're coordinated and they just want to make the sale. But I think the really best ones do have a really unique way of empathizing with their customers.
That's been my experience too. They're the best relationship people I've ever seen. The ones who are really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to touch also on the personalization stuff that you mentioned. So I'm sure you've seen the evolution of ABM, not a new concept whatsoever. I actually have been a little bit shocked in having dozens and dozens of conversations with different marketing leaders in that even today, most ABM programs are still one to many, maybe one to few at best, but nobody's really doing anything on the one-to-one scale. Were there ever tests that you ran where it was truly one-to-one? Did that work well? Have you seen companies now try to use more AI tools to do one-to-one personalization?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think in marketing, you're almost always thinking about one to many can make communication personalized, right, in certain aspects, right? I change up the imagery, or I um, change out a little bit of the text or the particular use case I might call out. But part of the biggest difference I think between marketing and selling is And most of what I've seen in marketing, um, AI and personalization is still along those lines, like some very interesting tools, like a company called Prodport, um, that personalizes the product page, which is probably the most important conversion page on anyone's website, B2C in particular, but also in some B2B. And generally speaking, the page is the same. Like, we get to that page, there's a picture of the product with a description of it. Yet, you might want to have a different picture, or you might want to emphasize different things about the product based on a particular person. And so I've seen things like that coming into play, where it's not just, well, we're going to send you a separate email and then the rest of your experience is the same. It's no, we're going to try and personalize that experience all the way through, by having certain parts of our communication, our web pages, the things you're interacting with, that we know perhaps are going to be different for you than they are for Joe, for example. And so we're going to personalize those at scale, but still doing it at scale, I think, is the thing for marketing. Is everything's got to be at some level of scale.
Product page is such an interesting one too, because it obviously makes sense depending on your persona, your role within the company, your industry, what you care about, and what you want to see. And having one generic page is not going to cut it. You also kind of touched on that point that we were discussing before around marketing silos and kind of channel system, things like that. And best practices, you want a consistent experience for the user across everything. Are you seeing anybody successfully do that with new technologies, where you can actually kind of break down some of those silos and make sure that if you are trying to personalize, and give people that consistent user experience?
Yeah. Well, technology, I think now, so if technology can span those mechanisms or channels or media types, that helps right there, because take on those barriers, like your personal mail doesn't have to be a shot would be, or size or that I might create. I don't have to, when you have capability that can run across that and personalize several different things, nature, which is say, hey, we're going to use this and going to connect the dots on our personalization. Second, that you don't go around. My goal is, number of people who like to learn more button versus my goal to be a part of generating revenue. Now you've got somebody who is more incentivized to work with your peers, right? It's saying, I'm not going to do what you can do. It's important. Yeah. So because people know it's coming out of we have personal customer to be mindful of what we do. So it's fair for governance and cybersecurity people to say, like, hold on, let's make sure this solution is complying with our data standards, and we are not going to be exposing any customer data that should be kept private and confidential. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. But a lot of companies don't know, and it's kind of the Wild West out there. They haven't really thought about those things. But I am hearing from a lot of the AI companies that we invest in, they're starting to say, like, okay, we've got to put together, just like you have to have a cybersecurity questionnaire ready, you need an AI questionnaire ready as well. You've got to be talking about what you're using, what you're doing with the data, how your AI algorithms work, whether they are you're ensuring that you're not introducing any bias into them. There's all kinds of things that I think AI companies who are going to be selling to large corporates are going to run into, just as they do with cybersecurity today.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is all TBD in terms of what that looks like. And
Yeah.
it's so hard right now because, to your point of it being the Wild West, it's really hard to control individual people doing this stuff. But Pandora's box is open. A salesperson wants to go and do some research, they're going to type in one of their customers or prospects into ChatGPT, and now all of a sudden they know that that's one of your prospects. So it's a slippery slope. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, and I think also with some of the things coming out, you want to have a good customer experience, right? So human in the loop is really important before you let AI just send things out to your customers, because you want to make sure you're going to be giving them a really good experience, right? So, you and I spoke about AI is really pretty good right now, but I do think where we are with it right now, you still need to have a human verifying the work and the output. And even when you still have to include a human in the loop, you're still going to increase efficiency. So don't think about that as, well, why bother with AI then? I think you're still much more efficient. You're just not completely hands-free at this particular, point.
It's such a good point too. And that feels like the natural evolution is you start with baby steps. You start with very heavy human in the loop, then decrease the human, and then eventually human is removed from a lot of the busy work.
Yeah, at a certain point, you're like, okay, we feel like we've really proven this out and it's working. And I'm sure you do checks on it on occasion once you get to that point. But I also do think companies should be out experimenting. I think it's going to be important in the people who aren't already thinking about how they can be using AI to be more effective, as well as thinking about how they might be able to use AI to make their own product and service better. They're going to be missing out pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Well, I think we have time for one last question, and I have one that I'm personally very curious to ask you. Obviously you were an operator for so long, and now you also sit on the VC side. So putting your VC hat on, is there either a request for product or space on the go-to-market tech side using AI that you're particularly looking for a solution or see a huge opportunity with?
So many. I'll say the thing that I have found really interesting is, because I think a lot of people are already using things in content, and that's looking really good. And we have a really interesting company in our portfolio called Tellme that is helping with the data observability and making sure the data you're putting into your AI models is correct. I think that's all really important. The thing I think is fascinating, though, that I've started to see is people who are building AI bots to do role play with salespeople, for example, because as a manager, right, it's really hard to do the level of role play you need to do with every single person on your team. You have a new product coming out, or you just hired a bunch of new reps, or there's a competitive issue that's come up and you need the whole team to be ready for it. I think this is a really interesting thing, and I've seen some of them and they're really pretty good. So I think that's kind of fascinating, having an AI bot buddy to help you learn how to handle objections or position your product better. It's kind of fascinating.
I love that. Actually, it kind of feels like the natural evolution of a Gong type solution. And I feel like I'm seeing that being applied to a lot of areas. So kind of like one-to-one tutors for kids, or for, a lot of other professions where there's some kind of training or repetition component of enabling that at a, one-to-one level without having a human in the loop. So I think that's a really cool one to watch.
Right. And that's probably a little safer than unleashing an AI bot on your customers.
Yeah, disgusting. The bar is so high. If it just people hate dealing with bots if it doesn't work perfectly, and it almost never does. So I hope it gets there, because I think my generation doesn't want to talk to humans. So if it can work, that would be great. But I think that's still a ways off.
It turns out that's becoming true for almost all generations.
Really?
Yeah, there's some
Not
really
surprised.
interesting studies about how people resist talking to anyone in sales until they're really ready to buy, which is why it's all of our jobs to help get them all the information they need so they are not hesitant to pick up that phone and talk to our salespeople.
And also, that point you just made kind of leads to the whole, if the SDR function goes away and we have fewer salespeople, but they're really good at their job, we can push them so far down the funnel where that is the point of interception. And then everyone's happy. Customers are happy, sales team's happy, marketing team is doing their job. So that could be cool.
Exactly. I mean, if you even look at the software Tofu, like how can I help people all along that journey, right? How can I help them and give them a personalized experience, the information that they need? I think that's going to be a game changer for companies being able to do that better and have people who are excited and understand what our product and service is and how it can help them, and now they're really ready to go forward.
Well, no matter what, it's going to be a very fun next few years to watch all this stuff play out. So, Carol, thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to touching base in like 6 to 12 months where we can kind of go and say, what did we get right? What did we get wrong? And where are things today? So we'll have to do it
I would
again.
love to do that. I would love to do that.
That would be fun. Well, thank you all for joining. Really appreciate your time, and we will see you on the next one.